we're going to talk about logical puzzles that arise in Jewish sources. If you have that kind of mind, they're interesting in and of themselves, but I think there's a certain general moral that we have to draw from the existence of the whole category, and we'll get to that at the end. But let's warm up our brains with a few examples. You know, there are many times when everybody has to do a certain mitzvah. Let's say it's a recital of some kind, like Kiddush or Kriya Shema or something. And what happens is one person does, and everybody else listens. And by listening, they satisfy their obligation. Now, there is a condition on this process, and the condition is that the person who's saying should have the same level of obligation as the person who's listening, who wants to satisfy his requirement. If, for example, the person saying is only obligated rabbinically, and the person who's listening has a biblical obligation, it won't work. It has to be that they're on a level, or the one saying has a higher level. But it can't be that he has a lower level. Okay, now having said that, think of a possibility where you have two people, a younger and an older, and only the younger can recite for the older cannot recite for the younger. How could that be?
In the case that there is perhaps a prohibition on the older one, but for the younger one it's perhaps a bit looser. I remember like case of like Kiddush. I'm trying to remember the exact scenario, but
okay, let me explain what I mean by asking a question like this. I don't mean, can you invent other conditions that you could add to the case and then disqualify this one or that or the other way around? What I mean is that the only relevant consideration is age. And the way that age works in this example is that only the younger can recite for the older, and the older cannot recite for the younger. When I tell you the answer, you're going to be embarrassed, I hope.
Is it like a bris, where the younger has to have a bris, but the older one already had his bris, so he's not nearly so obligated?
Well, but there, we're talking about where you recite, like making Kiddush, right? Where you recite, the other person listens, and he satisfies his obligation with the one who's reciting. There, one is not doing for the other. It's just a question of somebody having responsibility to do the bris on one or the other. But that's not where one does for the other. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking perhaps certain things that a son has to say or express to a father. Is there such an
Again, let's say it's making Kiddush Friday night,
right,
or reading the Megillah, or something like that. Well, yeah, the reason that you're not getting it is because you're built-in chauvinists. Take a girl who's 12 years and 2 months and a boy who's 12 years and 3 months. The girl is already an adult, because girls become adults at 12. And the boy is still a minor, because he hasn't become an adult until he's 13. So she has an adult obligation, and he has only the obligation of a child. Only she can recite for him, he cannot recite for her. So it shows you that when you're thinking of comparisons, you might have to think a little bit outside the box to see. Once you see it, you think, well, of course I was only thinking about men. That's right, you were only thinking about men, weren't you? Wonder why that is. Calling the relevant psychologist. Okay, that's probably just like a joke. Let's take one that's a little bit more subtle. You have situations in halacha, in life, where things are clear. You know exactly what the situation is. You know exactly what has to be done. And sometimes you don't know. Things are questionable. You're not sure what the circumstances are or were that create the situation you're dealing with. and you have to deal with an uncertainty. Now there's an expression in the Gemara, Ein Safek Motz Bidei Vadai, which is sometimes taken to mean the following. Well, this I know for sure. And this, maybe yes, maybe no. So if I'm considering what to do, I'm considering which way to go, then what I know for sure takes precedence over what I don't know, because it's only possible. It's not for sure. It might be the other way. The stronger of the two is what you know for sure. That's a very natural intuition. But the phraseology in the Gemara is Ein Safek Motzi Midei Vadai. A suffix, a doubtful situation, can't remove from the definite situation. And here's the example the Gemara gives. Let's suppose that something is tummy. Tummy, to overcome tumah, you have to put something in a mikveh, immerse it in a certain body of water. This thing is definitely tummy, and it definitely needs to be immersed in a body of water. So, Ruvain was very dutiful, and he went, and he put it in the mikveh. But 2 days later, people discovered that the mikveh has a leak. And 2 days later, so much water has leaked out of the mikveh that's not kosher. Well, let's see. What was it 2 days ago? Nobody knows. Nobody measured it 2 days ago when he went in to put it in the mikveh. So we don't know whether the mikveh was kosher or wasn't kosher. Now let's apply your logic. What would you say in a situation like this? The item starts off tamei, vadai tamei. We know for sure that it's tamei. Now we put it into this mikveh, and we now discover we are ignorant of whether the mikveh was kosher when he put it in or not. What should the state of the item be now?
Tuma, still. Tamei. Kosher.
Okay, I got two possibilities. Neither of them is correct. Not in logic. Not in logic. I asked you to use logic.
It's still a suffix.
Right. No, what do you mean still? What do you mean?
Sorry, it becomes a suffix.
That's it.
Yes.
Let's think about it. A mikveh overcomes tumah. That's its job. A mikveh purifies, right? We just don't know whether the mikveh was kosher or not. So the item started off vadai tamei for sure. Now it went to a mikveh that we don't know its character. So then now I should have a doubt about whether it's tamei or not. If the mikveh was kosher, then it's pure. If it wasn't kosher, then it's still tamei, and I don't know which is which. So the logical conclusion would be that it's now suffix tamei. That would mean that the mikveh, which is a suffix, has now extracted the item from its vadai tamei status and elevated it to a doubtful status, maybe tamei and maybe pure. That's what the Gemara prohibits. The Gemara says a suffix cannot remove something from its status as vadai. Now I ask you, is that principle logical?
I think so.
It shouldn't be, because after all, you just figured out what its status should be. He said it. I just explained it. The status of the item should now be doubtful. And the Talmud is telling me it isn't doubtful. This is a legal rule. It's not a logical rule, it's a legal rule. For the aficionados, this is what's called a chazaka in Hebrew. There is a legal presumption that if a thing was in a condition, of course there are many conditions to put in, if a thing was in a condition, you don't know what happened, you regard it as remaining in the original condition unless and until you become advised the thing has changed. That even though in logical terms you don't know what was going on in the interim, the law is treat it as if it had stayed the same. That's a legal rule. Now when I say it's legal, not logical, here's what I mean. I don't mean that it's illogical. I don't mean there's any objection to it. I mean, would raw logic to itself deliver this conclusion? The answer is no. Raw logic would not deliver this conclusion. That's why it's delivered by a legal principle, and the legal principles go back to the Creator, who revealed this legal situation for us. And he told us, this is how I want you to treat cases like this, on the basis of this legal rule. So there's no objection to the rule that it's not logical in this sense, But you have to distinguish between things that raw logic could give you by itself versus things that are prescribed by the legal structure. Okay, we together so far? Now I'm going to give you a much bigger example of this. Can a court properly deliver a verdict which the court knows is untrue? The court knows, the witnesses know, the jury knows, if you're talking about the American system, the public knows, everyone knows the result is untrue, and the court delivers this verdict. Could what the court is doing be correct, valid, appropriate, justified, reasonable, when everyone knows that it is untrue? So I'll give you an example which the Gemara brings, and this isn't going to answer the question, but I'll give you an example to make it concrete. There was a discussion about a certain type of oven, under which conditions it could be pure or impure, and there was a disagreement, and it was a lopsided disagreement. Rabbi Eliezer was on one side, and everybody else in the Sanhedrin was against it, 70-1. But Rabbi Eliezer is a very great scholar, so instead of just voting him down, they decided to have a debate. And they debated. Rabbi Eliezer didn't budge, and the other 70 didn't budge either. What it looked like it was wearing thin, Rabbi Eliezer said, well, if I'm right, let this tree get up and walk a certain number of paces. And the tree did. Walking trees. So Yeshua, representing the majority, said, trees have no place in a legal debate. Take a stroll. Leave me alone. He said, well, if I'm right, let the stream, flow uphill. And it did. Yeshua said, give me a stream. Forget streams. So then, Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm right, let the walls of the house of study cave inwards. And there was a rumbling, and the walls started to cave inwards. Rabbi Eliezer turned to the walls and said, how dare you interfere with the debate of the sages? So, getting nowhere, Yeshua said that, sorry. Getting nowhere, Rabbi Eliezer played his trump card. He said, if I'm right, let a voice from heaven proclaim that I'm right. And a voice from heaven proclaimed that Rabbi Eliezer is right. To which Rabbi Yeshua said, the Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is not in heaven. And they voted against Rabbi Eliezer and fixed the law against him. How does that work? God himself is ruled out. And what does Rabbi Yeshua mean? The Torah is not in heaven. Who is he to say that? Well, the answer is those words are a quotation from the book of Deuteronomy, boys and girls. This is something which God himself wrote. Rabbi Yeshua is quoting God to himself. You yourself told us that the Torah is not in heaven. Which means you told us not to regard information from heaven in making a legal decision. So, when the voice of heaven proclaims that Rabbi Eliezer is right, he's definitely right. That's the law that in heaven is prescribed, proclaimed. That's the law that God intended. But there's a legal rule that you can't use that information. You know the information is true, but legally you can't use that information. And then we have to decide the outcome on the basis of the way you understand what the law should be in terms of your own logic and scholarship. And that's why they voted him down. Now, what I want to tell you is that in American law, contemporary American law, you have the exact parallel to that situation. If this is going to influence some people to think of the infirmity of religious thought, and the inability of religious people to think things through clearly and logically, and they're bound up in mysticism and all that kind of propaganda. But let me just remind you of a law that you all know. This is actually based on a Supreme Court decision. Let's suppose that poor Richard is accused of a crime, and the only piece of evidence that the prosecution introduces is a wiretap of his phone. And it's played in court, and it is absolutely clear that he's guilty. The voice prints are unmistakable, and what he says is unmistakable, and it's clear that he's guilty. And then the defense discovers that there was no judicial order to wiretap the phone. which meant that the police, when they tapped the phone, were breaking the law. According to American practice, legal practice, I don't want to say law because it wasn't passed by Congress, but it is legal practice for, 60 years, based on a Supreme Court decision. Evidence gathered illegally is inadmissible in court. So they made this wiretap without a court order. So that was illegal. So the wiretap, the recording, has to be dismissed as irrelevant. It can't be used as evidence. But the way I set it up, that's the only evidence. There's no evidence. He's going to go free. The verdict is going to be not guilty. Everybody knows it's false. That is to say, now let's be a little careful, that is to say, everybody knows he is guilty. But here's a little bit of a subtlety. So let's just stop to collect the conclusion, right? We have exactly the same situation. You have information. The information clearly convicts him of committing the crime, but the verdict is not guilty because you can't use that information. There's a legal rule that you can't use that information. That's exactly what's going on in the Jewish court. I think, though I never looked this up, I think that's one of the reasons why in an American court there are two possible verdicts. One verdict is guilty, and the other verdict is not guilty. The verdict isn't innocent. That's not a verdict. It's either guilty or not guilty. What does not guilty mean? Not guilty means he's innocent. No, not guilty means not proven guilty. Did he do the crime? We don't have any idea. We don't have to have any idea. Our job is to see, did the prosecution prove that he's guilty or didn't they? If the prosecution didn't prove he's guilty, we say not guilty. Not because we're saying he's innocent. We're saying what the prosecution said in court did not suffice, according to the law, to prove his guilt. So then when you say not guilty is an accurate verdict in court, but that's because it's not describing the situation that took place. So the same thing is true here when a voice from heaven proclaims that the law should be X, and they say, well, but the voice from heaven, it's not relevant to legal proceedings. It's the exact same thing. They know the voice from heaven is telling the truth, but they can't use that truth. And by the way, this has broad applications. Let's say it's not a voice from heaven. Let's say it's a prophet. The court is discussing the law, back and forth. He comes out, Isaiah, and he says, gentlemen, cancel the debate. I know the conclusion. I know the right answer. The right answer is X because the Creator told me so. That will be the end of Isaiah's career. Because we know that that's not true prophecy. Because Kodesh Baruch Hu that said Lo Hashemayim Hi. And not only that, but it goes even further than that. Because the Gemara says that Rabbi Meir was such a gigantic scholar, and his logic was so profound, that he could debate any issue on either side and convince the people he was talking to that he's right. And by the way, although I've taught this at least 100 times, and I've learned through the Gemara many times, I forgot that he learned this from Rabbi Akiva, because he was Rabbi Akiva's student, and Rabbi Akiva used to do the same thing. So, here we are. Is it permissible or forbidden? Here comes Rabbi Meir, says, it's permissible. Watch. A, B, C, D, E, permissible. Everybody says, right, permissible. He says, but it's forbidden, because X, Y, Z, W, Q, it's forbidden. Right, forbidden. Right? They can't deal with him. Therefore, the law is not decided according to Rabbi Meir. Because on the Sanhedrin, you have to vote what you understand. You don't trust somebody's superior knowledge and vote on his authority. You have to vote what you understand. And Rabbi Meir was so far above them, they couldn't understand him. He presents this side, seems right. So that side seems right. Put it all together, and you don't know what to do. Then you don't use his decision as your decision because you don't understand it. So this is a very strong statement. At any rate, what you learn from here is that legal rules can control a discussion where you may have a rule of logic, or a rule of mathematics, or a rule of science, and reach a certain conclusion, and the law may come out differently because the law tells you what of these other sources is relevant to the legal process. So knowing the logic or the mathematics or the science won't settle that. I asked one of my teachers, Moshe Meiselman, the following question. Suppose you have three authorities, three of the greatest authorities, Jewish authorities. They're discussing an issue, and they have three different opinions, A, B, and C. Now somebody comes to one of these authorities and asks him, what should I do? Well, let's see. He says A, but an equal to him says B, and an equal to him says C. The two of them agree that A is wrong. Shouldn't he, sort of be cautious and not affirm his position if two out of the three greatest scholars say he's wrong? So Rabbi Meisman said to me, in logic you're right, but in halacha you're wrong. Because the legal rule is, if you're at the top, the pinnacle of scholarship, then you have a responsibility to teach and decide issues according to your position. So you don't do it on the basis of probability of being right or wrong. You do it on the basis of this legal rule. And by the way, this would not paralyze you, because sometimes you say, let's see, I say A, he says B, he says C. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. Chances are I'm wrong. Chances are each of us is wrong because there's 2/3 against each one. Let's try to devise a way to do it which covers all the bases. Let's say there's a certain text of a contract that has to be written. And this one says, this is the text. Another one says, that's the text. That's the text. You could write 3 contracts and satisfy all of them. You don't have to choose. You could craft a way to satisfy all of them. Sometimes that's possible. Not necessary. If you're at the top of the scholarship collection in your time, then you issue your ruling. You issue your ruling for the people who come to you and ask for your ruling, and you don't have to take into account the fact that other people disagree. When there's a Sanhedrin, so then you could vote and you could settle which way the halakha should go. I didn't say which way was right. I said which way the halakha should go. But in our times, so this is an illustration of the idea that when you look into the Talmud or into the Shulchan Aruch and you're trying to understand its rulings, to take into account the fact that some of the information going into the rulings is a legal consideration, and it may interact with what you know from other sources, and you have to take them all into account, and not simply say, well, clearly this is so. I mean, there's an example in the Gemara. I can't go through all the details now, but let's suppose you have a house, it's a square, and someone makes a door by breaking the wall, but instead of breaking it rationally in the middle of a wall, he cuts a corner, which is dumb. Right? He cuts a corner, he cuts off a corner, so he's got a 45-degree angle door. Okay? How big is the door? So you say, well, take out a tape measure and measure it, dope. Just, so it's 4 feet. No, Rashi says, measure the 2 legs that were knocked down. That's how big it is. So it could be, if this is 4, the 2 legs together will be 5.5 or something. Right? One of the commentators says, but the 2 legs together are longer than the actual size of the door. That's true. They're bigger than the actual size of the door. But who says the actual size of the door is relevant? Maybe what's relevant is how much wall was knocked down to make the door. Maybe that's what the law is based on. For example, imagine that you are renting a house, and in the contract it says you can only open doors up to 4 feet. Right? That means you can break down enough wall to make a door of 4 feet, but no more. Okay? And you make a door in the corner. And the owner comes and says, 5.5 feet of my wall have been knocked down. Yeah, but the door is only 4. See, it's only 4 long, 4 across. It's only a 4 foot door. Maybe the owner's right. Maybe didn't mean how big the door is going to be, and how much wall you're going to knock down. So you have to be very careful to take into account that there are legal rules which determine the relevance of other factors, and they have to be taken into account as well. Okay, now let's try this. Divorce is executed by a man giving his wife a document called a get. Divorce, like other transactions, can be made subject to conditions. Normally, two witnesses are there, he hands it to her, and certain other conditions are met, and the divorce takes place. He puts on a condition. The condition is, I don't want you to be married to anybody else for 30 days. 30 days, that's all. Now, like I said earlier to some of you, my training is in mathematical logic, so I mean exactly what I say. Exactly. Word for word. I don't want you to be married to anyone else for 30 days. All right? She takes the get in front of witnesses and the whole thing. And on day 15, they rent the Plaza Hotel, and they have a band and flowers and a big meal, and in the middle there's a chuppah, and she's there. He gives her a ring, some other guy gives her a ring, and the witnesses are there, and the rabbi says, Mazel Tov. Okay? That's day 15 out of the 30. What is her status on day 16? She married to the first guy, married to the second guy, nobody, both of them. What is her status on day 16?
Non-divorced.
She's married to the first guy.
Okay, he says she's married to the first guy. Let's just get conclusions, then we'll try to reason it out. He says he's married to the first guy, yeah. Anybody else have any other feelings?
Well, I said non-divorced.
I can't hear you.
Non-divorced.
Non-divorce?
Non-divorced.
There was no divorce, so that's probably what's driving you, right? There was no divorce because she broke the condition. And she broke the condition, then she was married to the first guy. That everybody's happy with that?
Yeah, I agree. She might even be an adulterer.
Say again?
She might be an adulterer.
She might
May
be.
have committed adultery.
Yeah, but I didn't ask about that. I asked who is she married to, if anybody. Whether she's an adulteress or not depends upon this question being answered, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like, yeah, right. Let's follow this out. Let's take your thoughts and let's follow out its consequences. So let's see. He gave her a get, but there was a condition. And since there was a condition, and she broke the condition, then the get becomes invalid. Becomes invalid, so then she's married to the first guy. Okay, now let's figure it out. She's married to the first guy. What happened on day 15? Well, that's when the wedding was at the Plaza Hotel. Right, the wedding took place in the Plaza Hotel. Who was standing under the chuppah? This lady. What was her status? You just told me. She's married to the first guy. Right? That's what you told me. Married to the first guy. So on day 15, when she stood under the chuppah at the Plaza Hotel, and the second guy put the ring on her finger, what happened? Nothing happened. Because a woman can't be married to two people. Not possible. It was all play acting. It was all a joke. It was all a charade. Because since you're telling me she's married to the first guy, then on day 15, nothing happened. Oh, but if nothing happened on day 15, she didn't become married to anybody else on day 15, then she didn't break the get, did she? She didn't violate the condition, did she? Because the condition was, don't be married to anyone else for 30 days. And she didn't be married to anyone else for 30 days. And since she didn't be married to anyone else for 30 days, then the get is perfectly valid. She didn't violate the condition on the get. With me so far? Can you see the end of the trail? Okay, so now we're saying that the get worked and the marriage with the first guy was severed. So now, given our present condition, now on day 15, when she stood at the Plaza Hotel, what was her status? Free and clear, free as a bird, independent. unconnected to anybody. And therefore she is eligible. She is eligible to marry the second guy. And when the second guy puts the ring on her finger, she does be married to another guy. And then, of course, that breaks the get. So the get now is invalid. Do you see you're going around the whole circle? You're going around the whole circle. A implies B, and A implies not B, and B implies not A, and you go round and around, and you end up with no consistent picture. Whatever you say, if you follow the logic down the road, you'll get the contradiction of what you say. You say she's unmarried, you get the contradiction. You say she's married to the first guy, you get the contradiction. You say she's married to the second guy, you get the contradiction. Whatever you say, follow out the consequences, and you'll get the opposite. Is there something?
No, it's just painful.
Sorry?
It's just painful.
It's just painful.
How is she free to marry the new guy in a situation where we say that she didn't invalidate the get? It's still on the 15th day, so isn't she not unmarried to him?
Okay, I said it, and the words are there, but I didn't stress it. Again, the way it works is this. He gives her the get, and the get works immediately, but it only works if she's unmarried for 30 days. If she gets married for 30 days, then it retroactively means the get that never worked. It's not that the get will come into force 30 days later. No, it comes into force right away, but on the condition, right? And such a condition is perfectly valid. This is discussed in Rishonim. This is a perfectly valid condition. You could do this, right? If she goes through the wedding ceremony on day 15, then you end up in this paradoxical situation. So, this is, by the way, this is a variant on the well-known paradox in the Greeks called the liar paradox, where a thing defeats its own status. It has a little extra structure. What do you think they should do? How should the situation be resolved?
Legal ruling?
No, you could use the old legal resources. Just she should have a get from both men. She go through a divorce for both men. Situation is where she's married to one, if and only if she's not married to the other. She's free from this one, if and only if she is married to him. Situation is where marriage to both is in a complex of information where you can't break it. So you've got to undo both, so that you're left with absolutely nothing. Now, creating a paradox like this is a situation where the law, as law, doesn't tell you what to do, because you've created a situation where the law for the one and the law for the other don't interact in an appropriate way. This situation can be reproduced in many different circumstances, not with paradoxes, but where what you do is you create a situation which falls through the cracks. And then you have to have what's called a meta rule, a super rule, which tells you what to do with things that fall through the cracks. I'll give you another example. This is in the Mishnah, actually. You know what a shaliach is? A shaliach is an agent, not a messenger. It's an agent to do things. If I make Ruvain my shaliach, he does things, and what he does happens to me. If he goes to the market and he buys a book, I become the owner of the book because he's doing it as my shaliach. Or whatever it is. So, many things like that. Okay, now in marriage, the husband gives something to the man gives something to the woman, and they become married. He could send the thing with a shliach, and the woman could send the shliach to receive it on her behalf. Both the giving and the receiving could be done through shliach. Let's suppose two women appoint the same person, man or woman, to be their representative for marriage. You know, like a shatran who has lots of people. These two, each one says to him separately, or her separately, please, someone wants to marry me, I want you to be available to receive the ring, let's say, on my behalf, so that I'll be married. And then in the ideal world, let's call the women A and B. The man will say, I want to marry A, and she says, well, you met the right person, I can accept it on A's behalf. And then when he gives her the ring, A becomes married to him because she represents A. She could represent B, but not in this transaction because he wants A, right? But what happened is this. This fellow, having spent too much time in yeshiva, walks up to the shliach and says, "Achas mikem b'kudeshes li b'prutas or b'tabazu." One of you should be married to me with the ring that I'm giving to the shliach. Which one? Not telling you. Just tell you one of them. My declaration is, one of the two of you should be married. Well, the Mishnah says, is Safek Mikudeshes. Both of them are Safek Mikudeshes. Safek. We don't know. What don't we know? What don't we know? We know exactly what he said. We know exactly what he did. All the laws in the Shulchan Aruch are there. We don't have any doubts about any of the laws. We're not dealing with a disagreement about any of the laws. What don't we know? Well, the way the case is constructed, with all the laws and all the information, you fit in between two situations which the law doesn't decide. And you can do that. You can set up situations like that, like this one. The solution, practically, is the same thing. She has to have a get from both of them. Because she is what the Gemara calls Safek Mikudeshes, to each of them, Safek in the sense that all the information that we have doesn't settle this issue. Not that we're ignorant of facts, not that we're ignorant of law, but with all the facts and all the law, this issue isn't settled. That's another meaning of the word Safek. And this is an explicit Gemara with a certain commentary, more in Yuma. This idea I heard from Rabbi Soloveitchik many years ago. If you have a grain offering, flour offering for the temple, for the temple, so then the Kohen takes a little bit and burns it on the altar, and the rest is eaten by the Kohanim, usually. And what he does is called kmitza. He takes his middle three fingers and he scoops up some grain, and that's what goes on the altar. So the Gemara says, the flour that's in his palm and covered by the inner surface of his fingers, that's holy, and it goes on the altar. If there's any flour on the back of his fingers, that's not holy for the altar, and can be eaten by the Kohanim. What about flour in the cracks of his fingers, in between? What about that? The Gemara asks, what is the status of that flour? Okay? And the answer the Gemara gives is, it's a Safek. Well, you could be justifiably frustrated by that answer. Isn't that where we were before? We didn't know what to say, right? That's why we asked the question. And the answer is, it's a Safek. Thank you. That's where I was before. So Tosfos asks this. What kind of answer is that? So Tosfos says, what the Gemara is telling you is, there is no solution to this question. Not we don't know one. Sometimes the Gemara says take it, which leaves it open for later generations to settle. Right? No, the Gemara is paskening. Don't continue to investigate what's right and what's wrong here. There is no answer. That's what's there. Before, when you asked the question, you anticipated maybe there's an answer. The Gemara is telling you, no, there isn't an answer. Okay, that's a sensible way to read the sequence in the Gemara. The Ritva says something else. There says not that there's no answer. The Gemara is telling you that there's a positive legal ruling of its being one or the other, and you have to treat it as if with both possibilities taken into account. Again, no ignorance. There's no ignorance. What should I do? The answer is treat it as one or the other, and that's the definite ruling. You all, I think, probably all of you know of a situation like that. You've heard it discussed. It happens periodically, quite often. You've heard of Bein Hashmashos? Bein Hashmashos is dusk, from sundown to when the stars come out. And the Gemara calls that Safek Yom and Safek Laila. Right? So, I heard this part from Rabbi Soloveitchik. So, it's a Safek. You don't know whether it's day or night? Let Moses ask God. We didn't get this one straight. Could you please settle it for me? What is the dusk? How should we pass it? No, it's not that we don't know. We know very well. we know positively that it is Safek Yom and Safek Laila. Safek here means the law is treated as if it's one of the two and calculate all the consequences on that basis. So it's not, Safek doesn't mean ignorance. It can mean you have two possibilities and both have to be taken into account from a position of definite knowledge. So this is another type of situation which the law tolerates. Now, there's one more I wanted to give you, and then I want to try to draw a conclusion. Yeah, let's see if I can do this quickly enough. Well, I can start it anyway. It's almost an axiom of our theology that God is all-powerful. All-powerful. Which means, in many people's minds, he could do anything. There's no limit on what God can do. And that seems obvious. It wouldn't be God, it wouldn't be powerful, perfect, if he had limitations on his power. So he must be able to do everything. Let me offer you some examples to think about and tell me what you think, in terms of God being able to do everything. How about, can God learn something new? Learn something new. Learning something new is definitely an ability. Everyone in this room has it. Does God have that ability? I hope you're feeling uncomfortable. Let's take this one. Can God improve? The ability to improve is a genuine ability. Everyone in this room has it. Does God have that ability?
I don't know if it's an ability. I think it might be more like a lack, that you're becoming less lacking when you learn something new.
Why isn't that an ability? Sure, you become less lacking. That's quite correct. You improve. Isn't it good to improve? Don't we encourage people to improve? And don't we say to them, you can do it. You can do it. Come on, give it a try.
But you can only do it because you're lacking, right? You're becoming less lacking. God can't lack anything.
Correct. You can only do it because you're lacking, and God can't do it because he can't lack anything, which means he doesn't have the ability. Doesn't mean it's not a real ability. You know very well it's a real ability because everyone in this room has it. It's a real ability. It's just that he doesn't have it. Because the ability to improve or the ability to learn something new is only had by imperfect beings. You need to be imperfect. Your words were not bad. You need to be lacking something in order to have that ability. Some abilities apply only to imperfect beings. So if we are committed to God's perfection, we have to deny that he has certain abilities. So to say that he can do everything and anything was a little incautious. It was a little over the top. What we really should have said is this: he has the ability to do everything that a perfect being can do. But that isn't everything, full stop, because some abilities apply only to imperfect beings. That's what we should have said. So what we learn from this puzzle is a certain naive, simplistic idea of describing God is wrong. It's a wrong way to describe God. It's simply not correct. Those are easy ones. The one that I'm going to mention to you, you can think about it, is whether, so to speak, I mean, it's a little flippant, but the question is, can God commit suicide? Our tradition tells us that God's existence is necessary. He's mukhrach hametzius. And you might balk at this anyway. So it's necessary. So what? Isn't necessity stronger than God? But our traditions say that since his existence is necessary, his non-existence is impossible. And that means, so to speak, by the very definition of what he is, that's what he is, and not otherwise. So, since his existence is necessary, we don't say that he has the ability to end his own existence. So what a little logical analysis does here is to show you that a certain natural, I would say until you hear this, everybody agrees that he can do everything. And if you didn't think he could do everything, you'd be considered to be a heretic. Now, I want to draw a conclusion. I have to run because I must make a certain appointment tonight. One thing we have to learn from this is that the Torah expects us to use logic. Torah expects us to use logic, which then implies that the Torah has a certain trust in logic. Not that you can't make mistakes, but you got to use it anyway, even though you could make mistakes. The Torah relies on logic. The Torah takes it for granted that you're going to use logic to analyze what it teaches you. And the bigger conclusion is God chose to interact with us in a way that we can understand. That's a big feature of the project. He created us with certain intellectual abilities, and then he, so to speak, restricted by his own, so to speak, choice. He restricted his interactions with us largely to those phases that we can understand. Not everything, some things could step beyond, but a great, great percentage of what he does with us, he does within boundaries that the understanding he created in us can grasp, which means he wants to have a relationship with us of mutual understanding. That's the kind of relationship he wants to have. If that's the kind of relationship he wants to have, it's not optional for a person to say, I'm doing what the rule book says, leave me alone. I'm spending the rest of my time at the beach. No. In general, all the abilities you have should be used to serve God. Your intellectual ability is high on the list. That ability should be used. The tradition requires it because he wants to have that kind of relationship. Now, when you push that, you think about the relationship, there's a sharing relationship. Sharing. The way you could share with a 6-year-old. When you speak to a 6-year-old, use vocabulary that he can understand. You explain concepts he can understand. You then share those concepts, you share those experiences. Of course, he doesn't understand the rest of you. He's only 6. But that doesn't mean there isn't any sharing. There is sharing on the level that he can appreciate. That's the kind of relationship that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants with us. That's a big idea. It's an idea that has lots and lots of consequences. And what Olam Haba is, the world to come is, and what the possibilities are for this world, it has lots and lots of consequences. And when you start with puzzles like this and you see what the tradition wants from you, then you get a kind of glimpse into the world where that's the kind of relationship you have with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yeah.
What faculty in the imperfect beings could actually approach or be related with the perfect beings?
What kind of approach could do? It's very interesting. I saw recently, we call one of the terms that's used to describe God, so to speak, is Ein Sof. Ein Sof means unending. And they all say it's all negative. It just says that there's no end, right? But this, I forget who it was who says it, but it doesn't say there's no beginning. It just says there's no end. So if I take it literally and strictly, it means you can begin. You can have partial understanding. It's just that you can't get to the end of understanding. So he reveals himself to us in certain ways, and those ways of revelation are understanding. And in case you happen to know a lot, I'll quote a Rambam to you, and then I have to run. Rambam says, we can't describe what he is, we can only describe what he does. Part 1, chapter 54 of the guide. Right? But in there, he quotes a verse. The verse says, show me your ways, which is the things that you do. And the next word in the verse is, ve'eda'acha, and I will know you. Says the Rambam, knowing God's ways is a knowing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I put the A in there, a knowing. It is a knowing. It's a beautiful diuk. You read the verse carefully and literally, that's what it says. If you know my ways, you know me. Not all of me, right? Not the infinity that I am, but that is a knowing of me. Says, and the Rambam says so. So that would mean that there may be no end to what it would be to know God, but there can be a beginning. That's the approach. And he created us with that ability because that's the approach that he wants.